So today let's talk about needles. We have three main shapes of needles: straight needles, double pointed needles, and circular needles. We also have three main types of materials out of which needles are made. We have metal, plastic, and wood. So let's start by talking about the materials first. Let's go with metal first. Good thing about metal needles, they're strong. If you sit on them, they won't break. They'll probably hurt you more than you'll hurt them. One bad thing about metal needles is they tend to make that annoying clicking sound. So if you're somewhere where it's quiet and you want to knit, probably not the best thing to take along. One other good or bad point about metal needles is that they tend to be quite slippery. It does depend on the coating of the metal. Some of them can be sort of more grippy than others, and others can be more slippery. But generally they're usually quite slippery, and that can mean that you can knit quite quickly on metal needles. But it also can mean that the stitches slip off the end easily and you lose them. So those are metal needles. Plastic needles aren't so common. Bad thing about plastic needles, they're quite weak, they're going to break if you sit on them. They just don't feel so nice to me. I'm not a big fan of plastic needles, but they're a little bit softer on the hands than metal needles are. Okay, now let's have a look at wooden needles. Wooden needles are usually either, say, bamboo or rosewood or other common woods, but I prefer bamboo out of all of them. Now, wooden needles are lovely and light. Metal needles are so much heavier, and I know for me that metal needles irritate my hands more. It's harder for me to work with metal needles than to work with bamboo needles. Bamboo needles are nice and soft and light, and for people with arthritis or tendonitis, things like that, any type of hand pain, then bamboo or wooden needles in general are a lot better. In comparison to the wooden needles, the stitches really grip onto the bamboo usually, and so this does slow the knitting down somewhat, but I prefer that sometimes. Then the stitches don't slip off as easily as with the metal needles. So those are the materials out of which needles are made. Let's move on now to the shapes. So we've been looking at the straight needles here first, and straight needles are generally used for flat knitting. So for example, if you're making a scarf or a stole or even a cardigan or a jumper that's made in flat pieces, then you can use the straight needles for them. So one of the disadvantages of straight needles is that if you're sitting next to somebody and knitting, the end might poke them. So if you're in a confined space, then straight needles aren't probably going to be the best thing for you. You can get them in different lengths. I think these ones are 25 centimeters or so, and you can get them going up to like 40 centimeters as well. Double pointed needles over here are used for working things in a circular fashion. So they normally come in a set of 5. Some of them come in sets of 6, but normally they come in a set of 5. And one needle is what we call the active needle, and the other 4 are arranged to form sort of a rough circle. Great things about double pointed needles is that you can have a tiny number of stitches on them, just like 3 or 4 or 5 stitches on them, so you can do really small diameter projects on this. Usually they're used for stuff like socks and hats and sleeves. What else did I want to say? So these come in different lengths too. I think these are maybe 20 centimeters or so. and these are 12.5 centimeters, and these short ones are good for things like the fingers on gloves. Little fiddly, tiny things. So with double points, I prefer the material that I use to be wood, because then the stitches grab on to the needle more. With the metal one, sometimes I find that the needle falls out, which isn't good for anybody. So far we've looked at straights and double points. Now let's go down to the front here. My favourite needles of all, the circular needles. So the circular needles, woo, there it goes. Circular needles have two straight needles joined together by a flexible cord, usually plastic. The best thing about circular needles is that you can use them for circular knitting and for flat knitting. So you can go in the round or back and forth. Another good thing about circular knitting is that the weight of the project is held mainly on the cord, and that takes some of the strain off of the wrists that is sometimes associated with straight needles. Also, if you're in a confined space, the ends aren't that long. They won't poke the person next to you. So when looking at a circular needle, you have to think obviously about the thickness of the needle itself and the length of the cord. So we start here with a 30 centimeter circular needle, and the length of it is measured from tip to tip, not just the cord part, from tip of needle to tip of needle. So 30 centimeters long, that's used for things like socks or mittens or sleeves, any other small diameter knitting. And circular needles are advantageous to double pointed needles because there's no join between the two needles. Say with the double pointed needles where the two needles join, sometimes it's not very clean, the join there, but with circular needles there is no join. It's all circular. Then we have a 40 centimeter needle here. These are used for things like hats, for adult hats, or sometimes baby clothes and things like that. I think this one's 80 centimeters long, so this would be for a full garment. Also, the longer needles can be used for the magic loop method, which I won't talk any more about here, but about 80 centimeters or above is good for the magic loop method. Now this one's 100 centimeters long, and I like the cord on this one because you can really push it flat without worrying about it breaking. So this is actually really good for magic loop method, having this one. Whereas these aren't quite as flexible. I wouldn't want to bend that one as much. It might snap or break. So it's really important when you're looking for a circular needle that the join between the tip and the cord is nice and smooth. You don't want to have any sort of bump or anything that the yarn might get snagged on, because if you do, then every time you're trying to pull the stitches up there, it's going to slow you down and possibly ruin your knitting. Another thing to think about with just needles in general is the shape of the tip. So some of them can be quite blunt. Where are my blunt ones? I didn't bring them with me. Alright. So the tip of the needle is important as well. When you have a long, thin point on the needle, that's good for working with thin yarns like lace, as you can insert them under the tiny little string. But the blunter tips are good for yarns that might split up. So say for example cotton, that tends to split into little tiny fibers. A good blunt tip is going to probably go around the yarn rather than through the center of it. So there we have our needles. Happy stitching, everybody.